Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you guys here. If you guys joined our first Impro webinar, we started the series earlier this year, and we're continuing on with this series. This is actually going to be a two-parter. So this one's going to be on how to track your success, Impro's project session for strategic project monitoring. We are going to have a part 2 in the new year, so take a look out for that. We're just getting our comms ready for it. And to get started, just to do some quick introductions, you guys probably already know me. My name is Joel. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Impro. We're also joined by Ofer Breyer, who much of you guys will already know as well, co-founder and CSO. Really, the methodology is behind all of our Impro work and really the sessions that we do create. One other thing I want to kind of get through before we do get started is just the agenda and a couple of housekeeping rules for you guys to know. So if you guys did join our previous micro webinar, we do schedule these and structure it in a 22/8 kind of structure. So 22 minutes will be the actual session. We'll do a deep dive on projects, also a case study, and then we're going to leave 8 minutes for discussion and questions. So if you guys have questions already, you can go ahead and throw that into the Q&A or the chat. We're going to circle around and pick those up. But I would encourage you guys follow along with the presentation, and we might answer a couple of those questions. As always, all participants are welcome to voice your thoughts. The only thing is, if you can kindly just raise your hand if you wanted to speak and actually show your camera, by all means, just for me to kind of direct traffic and make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. Of course, all participants have access to their mic, so if you want to turn it off, whatever your preference is, no worries. And of course, you guys are more than welcome to share anything on your experience with Impro. We know that you work with our coaches and performance strategists, so anything you want to keep confidential, by all means, keep it to yourself. But if you do want to share your experiences, best practices, or anything that does resonate in the webinar, by all means, again, share. This is what this is all about, community building with our participants. So without further ado, getting through all of that, let's get into the meat of it. So again, this webinar is about progression and really how you develop as a participant. And one thing that I think all of us have maybe heard about here at Impro or somewhere else is what's called the 20/80 rule. So the 20/80 rule, you can see that in really any place, any group or collection of people, is 20% of any given subset really accounts for 80% of the actual performance. So you can think of this, I like to think of, for example, athletes or sports. If you look at hockey, 20% of NHL players are consistently the ones that score goals, have the assists, win games, win championships. And then you have the other 80% of the NHL, not that they're, average hockey players, they're obviously elite. But again, it's that 20 subset that really drives the performance. And even there, you can kind of scale it out or have that fractal quality where the NHL itself can be that 20% of elite group. And then you have all other hockey players. So again, it's a very common pattern that we see throughout different industries and also in business as well. You can think of the processes and the work you do in terms of that 20/80 rule. So here at Impro, what we try to do is we try to get you so that that 20% is really the work that you put in. So planning, tracking progress, and regular communication that then results to the 80%, which is the goal achieves, the deadlines met, and overall team performance. And what we find working with participants, sometimes it can sometimes be flipped. Sometimes you're spending 80% of your time doing the planning, doing the meetings, trying to get everything sorted out for just 20% of the actual outcome. So we really try to push towards that 20% really being the foundations of that performance with things like our tools and also, of course, our coaches and performance strategists. And I want to bring in over here because this is something he's talked about extensively. It's also called the Pareto distribution. So what are your thoughts on the 80/20 rule? And what do you see in terms of the best kind of practices in order to achieve that 20% of optimization?
Well, thank you, Joel. First, let's talk about planning for a moment. You see, if you cannot track the data, the progress of something, you cannot manage it. I'll give it from basketball. You go to a basketball player, they're all playing. They're busy playing. Busy playing. No time to think. Don't think. Nevertheless, don't think. But then you go off to work with your coach. And when you work with a coach, you watch the videos of the game. So you watch how your opponents are acting, and especially why you didn't score the 3 pointers when you have 4 opportunities. What went wrong when you went to the left side of the basket and you didn't score? You watch the video again and again, again and again and again,
Mm,
and work with your coach to optimize that behavior. So next time you score four times or 5 times, and you become a hero. And your evaluation is changing. Now you're going to go to another group, and they will pay you $10 million because you can score from 30 times in a game. The same is what we do here. We have to stop for a moment and think of it. That statement comes from a book by Winnie the Pooh, the first page. Stop for a moment and think of it. Stop for a
yeah.
moment. Business is not a formula for success.
Mm,
It's when you know how to analyze what you have done and you have the time for it to track the progress, to saw what's happening, to see what's happening, and to plan the 20% that you will do better next time, which will create you 80% of your results. If we cannot stop for a moment and think of it, and immediately after the session, have the time, after the day, have the time. Most people say, yeah, I know my failures. You know, really? You have to know every micro failure
yeah.
and every good thing that you do in order to optimize it, make it better. And without working on this 20% that is most important to change in your behavior, that will accelerate the speed or the abilities that you have. Sometimes you have to change one little thing, but you
Mm,
don't know what it is. And if
yeah.
you will continue to score 3 without analyzing it, you will never score the 3.
That's really well said. And I think a couple of things come out of that. One is having someone that actually looks at the work you do to really see those places of friction or those roadblocks that otherwise prevent you from achieving your goals, right? So, a great example, what you said, basketball players, you can think NBA players have a particular coach for everything, right? Someone looking at their 3-point shot, looking at just their jump shot, looking at their free throw line shot. So very particular and getting very technical in terms of performance at a granular level. And I think that's really what we do with a performance strategist, right? The more that you do interact with performance strategists and really lay out the initiatives and the projects that you have, they can then pinpoint a couple of places where you might be missing a particular process, or maybe you're overextending in a certain area, and really try to keep you back on track in terms of the particular project you're trying to achieve. And another thing that you mentioned, I think is really important, and this kind of goes back to the last webinar we had, was that moment of reflection. I think, especially in the world we live in today, we're incredibly busy, incredibly distracted. We have a million things pulling us every way, and we really need someone or something to pause us and really reflect on what we're doing and think of if it's actually the best way to actually go forward, right? So all to say that I think that 20% is incredibly important. And once you get that 20% down, it really will pay dividends with that 80% on goals achieved and actually deadline. And you can think of it as a bit of a process, right? Once you get that 20 down, then you can get the 80% results, but you can always do little tweaks to optimize it. And I think another thing that really resonates with the 20%, at least from what I've experienced, is getting particular focus on what area a project or initiative should go into, right? So there's an infinite amount of projects or initiatives we could potentially undertake, right? There's no shortage of things we could be doing at work, but it's getting specific in terms of, does this add value to me, my process, my team, and ultimately my organization? And here at Impro, we kind of think of projects and initiatives filling into one of 3 buckets. One of them, for example, being cost savings. So very general cost savings. You initiate, for example, a project to find a new enterprise service provider. So that's, again, saving money for your organization, for your team. You can also think of a bucket as increased revenue, which is arguably one of the easier ones to think about. That's an initiative or a project where you improve, for example, your sales team. So again, you can think of sales opportunities that lead to closing deals to lead to revenue. So increased revenue is pretty easy to track with metrics. And then that last one, cost avoidance. For example, you initiate a project to reduce employee turnover. So that one's a bit more unambiguous or ambiguous, I should say, where you have to think about the future and think about what do I do today that can have that cost avoidance into the future. And so with these three buckets, I want to take one of them and go a little deeper, have a bit of a case study. So we'll take cost avoidance and we'll look at it through the lens of something like meetings. So here we have a bit of a case study. You can see a couple of metrics. I know it can be dizzying, but we'll walk you through it so you can really understand how we took something like meetings, again, have that granular view in terms of the process, and then ultimately resolve in cost avoidance. So, Ofer, I know that this is a real example of a participant you worked with. So
Yeah.
maybe talk us through that first upper half, so that 50-hour average salary and those gray bubbles, that kind of was as it was the meetings that this participant
Yeah.
was having.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will explain. There are two things we need to know first. We always have to know what is our contribution to the bottom line of the company. Whatever you
Mm,
do, you have to make a contribution. If you make a contribution to the bottom line, the company is profitable, it's growing. If it's growing, you have a job. If you don't make a contribution, there will not be a company that you will work for.
mm,
Second thing, if the company is successful, now it's time for you to know how your personal growth will exceed the expectations. So you will make more money working for the company. You will have better position in the company, and so on. So this is a real story. When I had this uh, manager, and I think basically he was a VP. He has like 4 team leaders over there, and
mhm,
4 team leaders and 21 team members. And so we coached them every day. That's what we did. So one day, one of them is writing to me, "Yeah, I went to this meeting today. It was boring." "What do you mean it was boring?" "Yeah, it was a waste of time," he writes to me. And I'm saying only one sentence I wrote to him. "Remember the 80-20
mm,
rule?" One word.
mm.
Why it was a waste of time. And he says to me, "Because we have too much small talk and less work."
Mm,
Okay. Now me as a coach of a whole team, I need to, as a performance strategist, I need to look at the strategy now.
mhm.
So I'm asking, who was in the meeting? He says, everyone. Every Thursday we have a meeting, all of us, all the 29. We come up for 90 minutes of conversation about,
Mhm.
next week agendas.
Strategy, yeah.
See? So immediately I send a message to all of them, all the 29. How was the meeting today at 10 o'clock? Your weekly meeting. They call it weekly.
Mhm,
20 people out of 29 said it was a waste of time. Now that's a confirmation of a systemic problem, not a
mm,
personal problem. Maybe he was boring. Maybe the other 2 were boring, but 20 people were boring. Okay, now there's a red alert on the system that tells me one thing. Ask them why. So I'm saying, why? One word. Remember the 80-20 rule? One thing that you will change can change a lot.
mm.
And they told me that was the average kind. 30% of them they said there was we waste half an hour on small talk. Of course, 30 people in one room, it will take a long time to small talk.
Yeah.
And then I have nothing to donate to the meeting. I was just sitting like a dummy
Mhm.
over there, and I had nothing
Right.
to learn. Okay, so I'm saying, okay, I went to a website telling me how much is the average of each position making per hour. There are websites that can explain to you.
Right.
So I made the assumptions that they're making $50 or so. So now I'm reconfirming it next week. Next week, I'm asking again, Thursday, 10 o'clock in the morning. Did it happen? What happened this morning? I got the
Mm.
same numbers almost. Like 19 people said out of, it was 29 people. It was not 30. I changed it here 30 so it will be easy to calculate the numbers. But
Yes, it
it's
fits.
29 people.
Yeah.
So I said to them, okay. I said to myself, now I got it confirmation like 2 times. It means it's a habit.
Mm.
So now I write to the manager. Did you know? There's no offer I never knew. Of course, you are Canadians. You never say what you think. Okay. You're
Good
not
point.
straightforward like me. So, so he said, offer, what do I do? Give me a strategy. So
Mm.
thinking 80-20, I'm saying, okay, cut off the meeting
Mm.
to 60 minutes instead of 90. No small talk at all. And if there is time for small talk in the end, do it in the end, because this is not the important part, right? 28 rule says
Mm.
focus on what's important.
Right.
Then think before the meeting, instead of sending an email, invite all, think who should be in that
Mm.
meeting based on the
That's a
agenda,
yeah.
and invite only 9, because twice 20 people should not have been there. He did it immediately. He trusted me. He said, okay, I'm going for it. He invited
Mm,
9 people for 1 hour. A week later, he decided by himself to do it in half an hour. And he said to me, you know what, Offer? I
mm,
got the same results as always. 9 people, half an hour. So I went to him with the average of $50 per hour per person. It's an average, right?
mhm,
The old meeting was 90 minutes, time 30 people. The cost was $90,000.
mm,
Now that we moved it into 30 minutes and 9 people, the cost was $9,000. How much money did we save? $81,000. And now what if you do it to 60 teams in the company?
mm.
That's contribution to the bottom line
Yeah.
by finding one slight behavior, focusing on the 20% that will make the biggest change. And now the company was able to deduct costs, right, of time. This is
Mm,
this cost of time by $3 million, which means it was invested in other areas in a way, okay,
mhm.
of time, which means like instead of being in the meeting for so many hours, so many people, I erased 30 hours of work for them, and they
Yeah.
went to talk to partners, to talk to vendors, to talk to customers, and that brought deals of $11 million.
Wow.
This is how
Well
you
said.
think in micro levels. Thank you.
Mhm. Well said, Ofer. So a couple of things that you hit on that I think are very important. So you took us through again that old meeting structure of 90 minutes, 30 people. And what I like about it is one, you surveyed the entire group, right? So
Yeah.
if you've been a participant, we sometimes do things called pulse surveys, and that's kind of a one snapshot question that we try to aggregate to get your feelings and really your input in terms of a certain process or something that's happening in the company. So those are incredibly important because then we aggregate the data and we can then figure out, is this a local problem? Is this one person just experiencing a deficiency in a process, or is this systemic? Is this a pattern that's happening over a large population? So that's one thing. Again, we encourage you guys to do the pulse survey for that very reason. But the other thing that you alluded to too was the fact that there are a lot of different tools that were put into effect. So 80/20, how to become more efficient with what you do. The TAF model, so thinking, acting, feeling, and that reoccurring process whenever you have a certain situation or a meeting to just take a pause and think about what just happened and what you're going to do going forward. And obviously, that last thing that you touched on is having a performance strategist that can look at your particular situation, figure out with you what can you do at an individual level to optimize that process. But again, if we're working with an entire organization, it's very easy again to pick out those patterns and figure out how to best optimize it with you.
Mhm.
And then ultimately, we show value to the organization. So I think that's a very important thing that you hit on is sometimes, we're not given KPIs or giving particular metrics in terms of what we should follow. But I think we live in an age where, there's a lot of change management, there's a lot of position changing, there's a lot of uncertainty of what's going to happen. So I think it's really important to take the initiative as an employee and really show ways that you can provide value to the organization, right? So doing small initiatives here and there that really add up and aggregate to value given to an organization, it's important. But having a performance strategist that can help track that and can put a number to it, I think is the ultimate success story, right? Where you can actually say, hey, I saved $81,000 making a couple of tweaks in meetings and have data to back that up. I think that's an incredible thing to showcase. And also, we all have those performance reviews. I think it's something you want to have in your back pocket to showcase how you actually move forward and again, accrue value for yourself, your team, and your organization. So again, Ofer, thank you for taking us through that case study. I think that was super informative. The other thing I want to kind of pair with this again is the projects tools that we have. So you guys have probably seen a little banner in the Impro app that's start a project. And that's an incredible feature that we're super excited that we've introduced this year. And it helps you do exactly that. So it takes initiatives, it takes those projects that you have, first puts it into a category. So again, those buckets that we showcased before, revenue increase, cost savings, cost avoidance, and it allows you to work with your performance strategist to really work out, okay, how are we going to set up the metrics to first track this project? And then how am I actually going to go about getting the project done, right? So you can set up things like time frames when you want to get it done. And you can really, again, have someone in your corner that can really walk you through and, again, keep you accountable, right? And make sure that you are on task and that you're working towards that particular initiative. So with projects, it's an incredible way that you guys can really, again, take the initiative to push value into your organization. Sometimes we work with your buyers and we'll get high level KPIs that we can then inject into the project. So really, in any way that you think you guys can use projects, I would encourage you guys to get into it. Ask your performance strategist, ask your coach to open a session and get started. I know that some people might not have anything from now until the year end. We're all busy, we're wrapping up things. But particularly for 2024 Q1, they're all going to be projects you want to really shine on. And projects tools is an amazing way to do that. So I promised you guys that we were going to keep the discussion and kind of the thought leadership to 22 minutes. I think we just hit that. So now we're going to flip it over to a couple of questions that you guys might have. So Q&A. And again, if you want to talk live, go ahead, raise your hand. I can go ahead and call on you. And a couple of three areas, if you're thinking or if you want to have some sort of questions you want to ask. One is an area where you need to be more productive. Two, a project that you need to tackle. Or three, meetings or connection points. So I'll go ahead, let the questions filter in, but we already have one. Sean is asking, but what is the true cost savings or cost avoidance? So that's a great question. I mean, one thing you can think about is, and we've done a lot of work, I think, as a team to try to create those buckets in a way that you can facilitate really any project and initiative into one of those. So I would encourage you to think about what kind of projects and initiatives you want, write them down, right? Just take a piece of paper or, on your laptop note, just write down all the things that you think would bring value and then connect with your performance strategist on where would this fit? What bucket do you think this goes into? And more importantly, I think, what numerical value can we actually attach to that particular project or initiative? So I think in general, the cost savings or the cost avoidance are going to be different depending on whatever project or initiative you undertake. The one thing I will say is start small. If you're unsure, start with like 5K. Think, what can I save? How can I save my team or my company 5K this quarter, right? And then work backwards from that. That's a simple way to get started. Or you can do the reverse, a project, and then get to that metric. So that's what I would say. Your performance strategist, your coach is your best kind of opportunity to really hash out that plan.
I can give in a small example. I was talking to one of the VPs we work with, and he loved the new session, so he put immediately $250,000. He wanted, to do like a cost avoidance.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "How are you going to make it?" He said, "Well, I have 10 employees. Each one will have to do 25." So basically, he just delegated the project into 10 employees, 10 of the team members. Each one of them will have to do 10. That's how he will get. So he delegated the project that he's managing in order to do the cost avoidance by 250, just by delegating. Okay. So never mind. So just want to share because it was a conversation 2 days ago.
That's a good example. I think since we just launched this project, I'm really excited to see what kind of projects come out, right? Again, I said this before, but there is really an unlimited amount of projects that you could undertake for your organization. So we just try to help you silo them into what we think is a value add bucket that you can then prove, again, a monetary value behind. But you can get really creative in terms of the types of projects. So again, I would just say, work with your performance strategist, your coach, start thinking about projects, especially going into the new year. It's going to be a season where we're all going to have a busy schedule. We're all going to try to get a lot done. But having a performance strategist or a coach really guide you through the most important things. And again, the most value add projects you want to establish, I think is going to be super beneficial for you. So I'm not seeing any other discussion points. I'm hoping that's because we did a good job kind of covering all the material. But I do want to end with a couple of things. One is, oh wait, Bora is coming in with one question here. Can you give an example of a project? Well, we did give examples in terms of the 3 buckets. So those were kind of examples depending on the bucket. But really, it's anything you can think of. And also, I would encourage you guys, think about your role. So if you work in sales, this might be a little easy. revenue increase, right? So I want to increase revenue by X. How many, opportunities, deals, and meetings do I need to have in the pipeline in order to achieve that, for example? But there are other examples. If you work in HR, again, talent retention, right? That's a huge cost savings or cost avoidance that you can then carry forward, right? Keeping talent. We all know that hiring a new employee is something like 3 times more expensive than retaining one. So that's cost avoidance in the future. If you work in operations, you can look at your vendors. If you work in finance, you could look at, again, the different ways or the tech stacks that you use. So again, there's going to be a lot of different projects that you're unsure of. Always ask your coach or performance strategist. They can definitely guide you through that. So thanks, Bor, for that. Hopefully that answered you. Um, we do want to close with a couple of things. One, I do want to give you a little teaser trailer of projects, a little motivational clip. Hopefully it gets you inspired. And again, we are going to have a part 2 that's actually going to go through projects. So stay tuned for that. But we'll check out this video for now. So there you go. Hopefully a little bit of inspiration. Again, it's already released. So if you want to reach out to your coach or performance strategist, please do. Shout out also to our marketing team, our cars that put that together and also helped us host this webinar. So just a little love there. And a couple of closing remarks. First of all, thank you guys for joining. We try to do these micro webinars as efficiently as possible, try to give you some thought leadership and information, add a little bit of time for discussion. So again, we are going to send a recording this webinar probably tomorrow, so keep a heads up for that. A summary of key takeaways to reinforce the main points we talked about. So a couple of tidbits and tips that we can actually go through. And then a field kit that we put together for you guys. So if you joined the first micro webinar, we did the same thing, just a compilation of different things that we talked about, but also some practical tools that you guys can use yourselves. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining. We also do have most of our performance strategists and coaches on the call. So these are people that you probably chat with on a daily basis. You probably have some intro calls and catch-up calls with them. So I want to thank them as well. And everyone from the Impro team, we have a lot of love for you guys. So just want to share a little bit of love. And just a reminder, we are closing shop for the 25th, but we'll close the session now. I wish everyone a super happy holiday. And if we don't see you guys, a happy new year as well. So thank you guys for joining, and we'll catch you at the next micro webinar.